Before we dive into this thrilling story, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our captivating narratives. Now, let's meet Emily Turner, a woman whose life is about to change dramatically. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom sparkled under the light of hundreds of crystals hanging from the ceiling. Guests, dressed in their finest attire, mingled among tables adorned with extravagant floral arrangements. Emily Turner, a 60-year-old woman, discreetly observed everything from a corner of the room. Her navy blue dress, while elegant, was simple compared to the ostentatious outfits that filled the space. It was the wedding of her only son, Dylan, to Jessica Reynolds, the daughter of a well-known businessman in town. Emily held her champagne glass with slightly trembling fingers as she watched her son smile beside his stunning bride. A lump formed in her throat. Thomas should have been here, she thought. Her husband would have loved to see their son so happy. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the toast," announced the master of ceremonies. Emily straightened her posture as Jessica picked up the microphone. The young bride, in her designer gown and sparkling jewels, smiled at the crowd as she raised her glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this special day," Jessica began, her melodious voice echoing throughout the hall. "To my parents, Robert and Diana, thank you for always giving me the best. To the Turner family." She paused, her gaze landing on Emily. Something in the young woman's smile shifted, becoming more tense. "Well, to Dylan, of course." An awkward silence filled the room. Emily felt the eyes of the guests upon her. "Actually," Jessica continued, her tone slightly altered by the champagne, "I want to thank my mother-in-law for at least trying not to be a complete embarrassment to the family today." Nervous laughter rippled through the hall. Dylan looked at his wife, surprised, but she merely smiled and continued her speech. Emily remained motionless, her face a mask of dignity while humiliation burned in her chest. Across the room, Robert Reynolds watched the scene with a troubled expression. His eyes never left Emily's face, a deep furrow marking his brow. He seemed to see something that no one else did. Hours later, when most of the guests had left, Emily was preparing to exit when she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Turner," Robert Reynolds said, his voice low and urgent. "Can we talk for a moment?" Emily turned to meet the man's intense gaze. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds." Robert led her to a small terrace away from the ballroom. He made sure they were alone before speaking. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" he asked, his voice barely containing his surprise. "I don't know what you're talking about," Emily replied calmly. "3 years ago, when my company was on the brink of bankruptcy, an anonymous investor bought it for nearly $700 million, Robert explained, studying her face intently. "An investor who used a shell company in the Cayman Islands, an investor I've never met in person." Emily kept a neutral expression, but her heart raced. "Today, for the first time, I saw the design on your bracelet," he continued, pointing to the delicate silver band on her wrist. "The same symbol that was on the wax seal of the only handwritten letter I received from that mysterious investor." Emily's eyes involuntarily moved to the small butterfly engraved on her bracelet, the last gift from Thomas before his death. "It was you, wasn't it?" Robert whispered, a mix of astonishment and confusion in his voice. "All this time, my daughter has been humiliating the woman who saved our family from complete ruin." Emily gazed at the night sky for a long moment before responding. The stars sparkled distantly, indifferent to the dramas unfolding below them. "Your daughter doesn't know," Emily finally said, her calm voice contrasting with the storm inside her. "No one knows, really, and I'd prefer it to stay that way." "But how?" Robert insisted. "How did a supposedly middle-class widow manage to amass that kind of fortune?" Emily smiled faintly, recalling the beginning of it all. "My husband Thomas and I were engineers. We worked together for years on a project that few believed was possible." Memories flooded her mind. Endless nights in their makeshift garage lab, equations scribbled on any available surface, countless failures before their success. "In 2012, we developed a technology that revolutionized cell phone batteries," she continued. "We sold the patent for $25 million. Robert's eyes widened. "But that was over 15 years ago. How did it grow to 700 million? "Strategic investments," Emily replied simply. "Thomas was brilliant with numbers, and I have a good eye for promising technologies. We kept everything secret, even from Dylan." "Why?" Robert asked, genuinely confused. "Why live as if you were an ordinary person when you could have anything?" Emily looked at the ballroom where her son was still chatting with a few lingering guests. We wanted him to have a normal life, to forge his own path. We thought sudden wealth could harm him. And after Thomas passed away, Emily felt the familiar tightening in her chest at the thought of her husband. Thomas left us in 2020. By then, our investments had already reached 800 million. I continued to expand our portfolio, discreetly acquiring companies like yours. Robert shook his head, stunned. So Jessica is married to the heir of nearly $1 billion without knowing. Dylan isn't an heir to anything yet, Emily corrected gently. The money is mine, and I intend to use it wisely. Robert's expression shifted subtly, something calculating flashing in his eyes. And my daughter, she should know. As his wife, your daughter just publicly humiliated me at her own wedding to my son, Emily interrupted, her voice gaining a steely firmness. I think that says a lot about her character, don't you? Robert had the decency to look embarrassed. Jessica has always been ambitious. I'm sure she is, Emily replied, stepping away from the railing. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's getting late. As she walked back to the ballroom, Emily didn't see the determined look that formed on Robert's face, nor did she notice when he pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number. Jessica, he whispered when his daughter answered. We need to talk. There's something you need to know about your mother-in-law. A week after the wedding, Emily was in her modest apartment when she received a call from Dylan. Mum, his voice sounded strange over the phone. Jessica is asking some questions and about Dad, about how you guys lived before. A chill ran down Emily's spine. What kind of questions, dear? She wants to know where the money for my college came from, how we paid for the house, things like that, Dylan replied, sounding confused. She said she's putting together a family album and wants to understand our story. Tell her your father had a good retirement plan, Emily replied automatically, the lie rolling off her tongue easily after years of repetition. After hanging up, Emily walked to her office and unlocked the last drawer of her desk. From there, she pulled out a special laptop that wasn't connected to any home network. Within minutes, she accessed the security system she had discreetly installed in the house she bought for her son as a wedding gift. The cameras showed Jessica in her office on the phone. Emily activated the audio. I've hired a private investigator, Jessica was saying to someone. Something doesn't add up about their story. No one pays for Harvard with a good retirement plan from an average engineer. Emily watched, her heart tightening, as her daughter-in-law continued. If we find out they have hidden money, we can claim access as part of the family. I need lawyers specializing in family disputes. In that moment, Emily understood that war had begun. Turner Investments discreetly occupied the 40th floor of a skyscraper in the financial district. Unlike other companies in the building, there were no flashy signs or smiling receptionists, just a plain door with a biometric scanner. Emily had spent most of her time in this office since Thomas's death, quietly managing an empire that no one knew existed. That morning, however, her focus was not on the financial reports covering her desk. What did you find? She asked the woman sitting across from her, Helena Rocha, head of security for the company and a former federal agent. Helena slid a folder across the table. Jessica Reynolds, 28 years old, Wharton graduate, superficially impressive, but when we dig deeper, she paused significantly. The whole family is living a facade. Emily flipped through the report, her eyes quickly scanning the information. 70 million in debt? Reynolds Holdings is practically bankrupt, Helena confirmed. Robert is keeping up appearances with successive loans. The mansion is mortgaged for 80% of its value, and the only reason they still get credit is that he continues as a consultant for the company you bought. Which I bought, Emily repeated slowly, the irony of the situation not escaping her. And the consultancy? Payments come through the new management of Reynolds Holdings, just as you instructed after the acquisition. He probably doesn't even realize you are the one actually signing his checks. Emily leaned back in her chair, processing the information. And Jessica? She opened 3 lines of credit in the last 2 weeks, Helena replied, pointing to the last page of the report. She's heavily investing in this investigation into you. Not just 1, but 3 different private investigation firms. She really believes there's something to find, Emily murmured, more to herself than to Helena. The problem is that there is, Helena pointed out pragmatically, billions in assets that technically belong to you. If she can prove you intentionally hid this from your son all these years, Emily shook her head. I have all the documentation. Thomas and I always kept our finances separate from Dylan's. Legally, we're covered. Legally, yes, Helena agreed. But this isn't just a legal matter, it's personal. If Dylan finds out you've hidden this from him for 15 years, the unfinished sentence hung in the air, heavy with painful possibilities. Emily knew that what was at stake went far beyond money. It was her relationship with her son. "There's one more thing you should know," Helena added hesitantly. "We found some recordings of Jessica's phone conversations before she met Dylan." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Is that legal?" "Technically, no," Helena admitted. "But given what's happening, I thought you should listen." Helena placed a small device on the table and pressed play. Jessica's voice sounded clear and cold. "I'm not looking for love, Diana. I'm looking for security. Dad can pretend all he wants, but I know we're broke. I need someone with money or the potential to earn a lot. Dylan Turner seems perfect. Naive, hard-working, and with a seemingly stable family." Emily turned off the recording, her face impassive despite the storm inside. "She married my son for the money she thought he had," Emily stated, a dangerous calm in her voice. "Or for the money she suspected I had." "It seems so," Helena confirmed. "Keep her under surveillance," Emily instructed, standing up. "I want to know every step she takes." 2 weeks later, Emily received an email from Jessica requesting a meeting to discuss the future of the family. Curious about what her daughter-in-law's approach would be, Emily agreed. They met at an upscale restaurant in downtown. Jessica appeared confident in her Armani suit, her hair perfectly styled and a calculated smile on her face. "Emily, thank you for coming," she began, all smiles. "I've been thinking a lot about our family lately." "Oh, really?" Emily replied softly. "Yes. Dylan and I are planning our future, and I'd like to discuss the possibility of creating a family foundation." Jessica leaned forward, her gaze intense. "A foundation with shared governance among all members of the Turner family." Emily took a sip of water, maintaining a neutral expression. "And what would the purpose of this foundation be?" "Philanthropy, of course," Jessica replied readily. "We could help many people. I was thinking of an initial contribution of, say, $50 million. The audacity was almost admirable. Emily set her glass back on the table, carefully. "And where would that money come from, Jessica?" The young woman maintained her smile, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, from you, Emily. We both know you have more than you let on." "That's a serious accusation," Emily replied calmly. "Based on what, exactly?" Jessica adjusted the expensive bracelet on her wrist, a movement intended to draw attention to the jewelry. "Let's just say I did my homework. Harvard isn't cheap, Emily, and engineers don't earn enough to pay for that kind of education without leaving traces of loans. Thomas had an excellent retirement plan." Emily repeated the family story. "Please," Jessica laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "No one accumulates that kind of money with retirement plans. And there's more. The house where Dylan grew up, valued at nearly $2 million today. The fact that you never moved to a smaller place after retirement, the annual trips to Europe." Emily kept her face impassive, impressed with the extent of Jessica's investigation, but not surprised. "We lived modestly and invested wisely. It's not a crime." "Nor is it a crime to create a family foundation," Jessica retorted, her voice taking on a harder tone. "Think of it as a legacy, Emily. Something to unite the family. Our family is already united," Emily replied softly. "Or at least it was, until you publicly humiliated your husband's mother at her own wedding." A flush rose in Jessica's neck, but she maintained her composure. "It was a slip. I had too much to drink." "Alcohol doesn't create thoughts, Jessica. It only reveals them." The young woman changed tactics, her eyes suddenly welling with artificial tears. "I just want to be part of this family, Emily. I want to build something meaningful with you." "No," Emily replied, leaning forward. "You want access to the money you think I have, and you're willing to do anything to get it, even marry my son without loving him." The genuine shock on Jessica's face confirmed that Emily had hit the mark. The fake tears disappeared, replaced by a calculating hardness. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Jessica warned, her voice low and threatening. Emily smiled faintly. "On the contrary, dear, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I've documented every one of your investigative activities over the past few weeks, every detective agency you've hired, every lawyer you've consulted." She paused, watching the realization slowly dawn in her daughter-in-law's eyes. "I even have some rather interesting recordings of your conversations before you met Dylan, where you clearly state that you're looking for a husband for financial security, not for love." The color drained from Jessica's face. "You can't—" "I can do much more than you imagine," Emily interrupted, her voice still calm but filled with authority. "As for your proposal for a family foundation, I categorically refuse. If you attempt to interfere with my financial life or bring those unfounded suspicions to Dylan again, I will show him exactly what kind of woman he married." Emily gracefully stood up, leaving some cash to cover the coffee she hadn't even touched. "Have a good day, Jessica." As she walked out of the restaurant, Emily knew she had only played the first card in a game that was far from over. Jessica was not the type of opponent who would back down easily. Her prediction proved correct a week later when she received an urgent call from her lawyer. "Mrs. Turner," Lawrence Bennett's voice sounded tense over the phone, "we've received a notification from the SEC. They are investigating your investment structures." Emily closed her eyes briefly. "Jessica." "Probably," Lawrence agreed. "Someone filed anonymous complaints alleging possible violations in your offshore holdings. They will need complete documentation of all your transactions over the past 10 years. "Provide it," Emily instructed. "We have nothing to hide. Everything was done legally." "Yes, but a federal investigation can take months, maybe years, and it will inevitably draw attention to your financial situation." Emily immediately understood the implication. "Dylan will find out." "It's likely," Lawrence confirmed gently. That night, Emily sat alone in her home office, the only light coming from the computer screen where she monitored the security cameras of her son's house. Jessica was on the phone again, this time with her father. "It's only a matter of time now," she was saying, visibly excited. "The investigation will expose everything, and legally, as Dylan's wife, I'll have a right to part of the assets." "And if she has hidden it well?" Robert asked, his voice conveying concern. "That's why I filed for legal separation today," Jessica replied. "Not divorce yet, just separation of assets. It's preventive, so I'm legally protected while the investigation runs its course." Emily turned off the video, her heart heavy. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Jessica was playing to win, methodically building a case that would secure her access to the Turner fortune, even if it meant destroying her marriage to Dylan. It was time to counterattack. Lawrence Bennett's office occupied a discreet penthouse in a restored historic building. The dark wood walls and classic furniture reflected the traditional and reserved nature of his elite legal practice. It was the kind of place where fortunes were protected and business empires defended away from public scrutiny. Emily arrived punctually for the meeting she had requested urgently. Lawrence greeted her at the door, his usually calm face betraying slight concern. "They're already here," he informed her quietly. "They brought 2 lawyers and a forensic accountant." Emily nodded, adjusting the folder she was carrying. "Great. Let's end this once and for all." The conference room was spacious, dominated by a polished mahogany table. On one side, Jessica sat between her father and a team of well-dressed professionals with confident expressions. On the other side, only 2 chairs awaited, one for Emily and one for Lawrence. "Emily," Robert greeted, briefly standing. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Actually, I was the one who requested it," Emily calmly corrected, taking her seat. "After learning that Jessica filed for legal separation from my son without even informing him, Jessica had the decency to appear slightly uncomfortable, but quickly regained her composure. It was a preventive move, just to protect our mutual interests during this transition period." "Transition," Emily repeated, the word laden with meaning. "Interesting choice of words." Lawrence cleared his throat discreetly, assuming his professional role. "My client agreed to this meeting to discuss a resolution to the current situation. Before we proceed, I would like to establish that Mrs. Turner does not acknowledge any allegations of financial impropriety and is fully cooperating with all regulatory investigations." One of the Reynolds family's lawyers, a middle-aged man with thin-framed glasses, leaned forward. "We understand that your client would prefer to avoid prolonged public scrutiny. We are here to offer a solution that benefits all parties involved." "Please continue," Lawrence prompted. Robert took the floor, assuming the role of conciliatory patriarch. "Emily, we recognize that you've built something extraordinary over the years. We don't want to destroy it. On the contrary, we want to preserve and expand that legacy." Emily remained silent, watching the theater unfold. "Our proposal is simple," Robert continued. "The creation of a family trust agreement, managed by a committee that includes representatives from both families. This would ensure that the assets remain intact for future generations while allowing equitable access to resources." The forensic accountant slid a folder across the table. "We've drafted a preliminary structure based on our conservative estimates of the assets in question. As you can see, we propose a division of responsibilities that keeps you as the main administrator, Emily, but with appropriate oversight." Lawrence briefly reviewed the documents before passing them to Emily, who barely glanced at them before closing them. "It's a generous proposal," Jessica commented, her tone suggesting she was doing a great favor. "Considering the circumstances, many in my position would seek a more aggressive division." Emily finally spoke, her calm voice cutting through the tension in the room. "And what would those circumstances be, Jessica? The fact that you illegally investigated your mother-in-law, or that you married my son without loving him, merely for financial interest?" Jessica paled but maintained her composure. "That's defamation. My feelings for Dylan are genuine. I have proof otherwise," Emily replied simply. She then turned to Lawrence. "Please present our counter-proposal." Lawrence opened his own folder and distributed documents to everyone present. "My client is prepared to offer a one-time settlement of $5 million to Mrs. Jessica Reynolds Turner." Robert frowned, confused. $5 million? That's substantially less than we discussed. "In exchange," Lawrence continued, unfazed, "Mrs. Reynolds Turner will agree to permanently disappear from the Turner family's life. This includes the immediate withdrawal of all regulatory complaints, divorce with a perpetual confidentiality agreement, and cessation of any direct or indirect contact with any member of the Turner family, including Dylan." An astonished silence fell over the room. Jessica was the first to regain her voice, her indignation evident. "This is absurd. We're talking about a fortune of nearly $1 billion. We're talking about my son's future," Emily corrected, leaning forward, her eyes fixed on Jessica. "You have two options. Accept $5 million and disappear, or face years of costly litigation, which you cannot finance against an opponent with virtually unlimited resources and no rush." She paused, allowing the words to sink in. "And even if, by some miracle, you eventually win, you'll have destroyed any chance of happiness for Dylan. He will never forgive you when he discovers your true motivations." Jessica exchanged nervous glances with her father and the lawyers, the facade of confidence visibly crumbling. $5 million is a lot of money," Emily added gently. "Enough to start over somewhere else, away from here, away from us." The golden light of sunset bathed the mountains of Santa Fe, painting the sky in hues of amber and purple. Emily watched the natural spectacle from the porch of her new home, a traditional adobe building nestled among century-old pines. The dry, clean air of New Mexico filled her lungs, bringing a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. A year had passed since that decisive meeting in Lawrence's office, a year of transformations, revelations, and finally, healing. Jessica accepted the $5 million. With no realistic alternative, she signed all the documents prepared by Emily's legal team, withdrawing the regulatory complaints and agreeing to an immediate divorce from Dylan. The confidentiality agreement prevented her from discussing any aspect of the situation: Emily's fortune, the financial agreement, even the reasons for the separation. Within a month, she had left the country. Rumors suggested she was living somewhere in Europe. Telling the truth to Dylan was one of the hardest conversations of Emily's life. One rainy afternoon, sitting in his apartment's living room, she finally revealed everything: the technology that she and Thomas had developed, the sale of the patent, the investments that transformed $25 million into a billion-dollar empire. "Why did you hide this from me?" Dylan asked, his voice reflecting not anger, but deep confusion. "Didn't you trust me?" "We trusted you more than anyone else," Emily replied, holding her son's hands. "But we didn't trust what money could do to you, to your life. We wanted you to have a normal childhood, to carve your own path without the weight of expectations or the distortion that sudden wealth can bring." Dylan needed time to process it all, not just the revelation of the family's wealth, but also Jessica's betrayal. The documents Emily showed him, including the recordings where Jessica admitted her true intentions, were devastating. The divorce was quick, citing irreconcilable differences. Dylan immersed himself in work for months, finding solace in his architecture career. Emily respected his space, remaining present but not intrusive as he rebuilt his life. 6 months after the divorce, Dylan met Sarah, a primary school teacher who loved art and had no idea about the Turner family's wealth. Their relationship developed naturally, based on shared interests and a genuine connection that was visible to anyone who saw them together. It was Dylan who suggested Emily move. "You and Dad always talked about Santa Fe," he said during dinner, "about how you loved the light, the mountains, the art. Maybe it's time to fulfill that dream, Mum." Emily hesitated at first, worried about leaving her son behind. But when she realized he was truly okay, happy with Sarah, thriving in his work, she finally allowed herself to consider what she wanted for the rest of her life. Santa Fe was a revelation. Emily bought a secluded property, hiring architects to create a space that honored the local culture, and quietly settled into the community. Here she was not the mysterious billionaire, nor the humiliated mother-in-law. She was simply Emily, the friendly newcomer who frequented the farmers' market on Saturdays and attended the library's book club. The sound of her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Dylan. "How's the sunset today?" he asked, the familiarity in his voice warming Emily's heart. "Breathtaking," she replied, watching the last golden rays disappear behind the mountains. "As always." "Sarah and I are thinking of visiting you next month," he said, "if that's okay with you." Emily smiled. "You know you're always welcome." After hanging up, Emily returned inside the house. Her office, unlike the previous one in New York, was airy and lit by large windows. Instead of monitors displaying financial charts, the walls now showcased local art and photographs of landscapes she had taken on her hikes. Not that she had abandoned her business. She still managed her financial empire, but with a new approach and purpose. 6 months after moving, Emily had quietly created the Thomas Foundation, dedicated to supporting young engineers with resources to develop and maintain their patents. Rather than selling them to big corporations for a fraction of their potential value, the foundation operated quietly, with her name not publicly linked. Beneficiaries received mentorship, seed capital, and legal protection, allowing them to follow their own paths of innovation. It was the legacy Emily knew Thomas would have approved of, not a plaque with his name on a building, but a network of brilliant minds empowered to create and thrive. Emily sat at her desk, opening a small safe where she kept her bracelet with the butterfly charm. She rarely wore it now, but liked having it nearby as a reminder of Thomas and the journey they had shared. "You were right, dear," she murmured to the photograph of her late husband on the wall, "about almost everything." That evening, as she strolled through the solar-lit garden, Emily reflected on the true meaning of wealth. In the past 2 years, she had faced Jessica's financial manipulation, the greed of the Reynolds family, and the pain of watching her son betrayed. But she had also witnessed Dylan's recovery, the blossoming of a new, genuine love in his life, and discovered her own capacity for rebuilding. Emily finally understood the difference between being invisible out of fear versus choosing to maintain privacy. For years she had hidden her fortune, fearing that people would see her only for her money. Now she chose to live simply, not out of fear, but because she had found peace in authenticity. In the end, the best revenge against those who tried to humiliate her was not the destruction of their ambitions or the exposure of their lies. It was thriving in their absence. It was using her wealth not for ostentation, but to positively impact other lives, creating a silent legacy more valuable than any bank account. As the stars blossomed in the clear desert sky, Emily Turner, the invisible heiress whom no one would imagine was worth billions, smiled at the vastness of the universe. Her true wealth was not in the companies she owned or the offshore accounts she managed, but in the freedom she had earned to live on her own terms, loved for who she truly was, not for what she possessed. And that, she realized, was something Jessica, with all her calculations and manipulations, would never understand, nor would she ever possess. If you enjoyed this thrilling story about power, family secrets, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave a like and comment on what your favorite part of Emily Turner's journey was. Your interactions help us continue bringing amazing stories like this every week.